And good morning. Welcome to this Artemis Resources presentation. My name's Liam and I'm your host for today. I'm joined by Alastair Clayton, CEO of Artemis Resources, and we're going to talk today about the history and the future of Artemis Resources. Alastair, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, great, Liam. Thanks for having me on.
What an interesting year 2021 and 2022 have been. How have you, from your CEO viewpoint, have you seen the wider market?
The wider market, well, it's an interesting question. Gold equities in and of themselves have been quite weak for about the last 10 months. A little bit odd. The gold price has not been bad. It's pretty good. Gold companies have been very profitable. You're seeing a lot of cash on the balance sheet. You've seen very tentative dipping of toes in M&A markets. But yeah, other than that, I mean, just looking at my personal investments and looking across the industry, gold equities as a group have been weak. I personally think that's just a function of prettier girls in the room promising lithium and rare earth dreams and the sort of cyclical nature of these things. But gold's been around for 10,000 years in human history, and it's going to be here for another 10,000.
Absolutely. At what point did you get involved in gold? Was gold your first love, or was it something that you evolved into?
Yeah, it was in terms of sort of growing up in Western Australia and wanting to be a geologist. It was the obvious place to go into the gold industry, and I've been truly lucky in my career, having worked for some fantastic entrepreneurs. And some fantastic and companies that have made some fantastic discoveries and developments. I suppose a little bit of a sort of left field one, and I think I'm on record of saying this before. I'm not necessarily a gold bug. I don't believe that the world is going to go to hell in a handbasket, but I do believe gold plays an essential part in people's investment portfolios and plays an essential part in the financial system. So I guess from that perspective, I began in the West Australian gold industry. I got involved in some mid and large cap companies from gestation through to exit. So developing the largest nickel mine in Australia with a young entrepreneur called Andrew John Henry Forrest, who I think is now the second richest man in Australia, Fortescue Metals Group. What a great learning period that was. And then over here in the UK, I moved to the UK 20 years ago, or 21 years ago actually, and have been lucky to be involved in a couple of fantastic companies. I'm not a serial entrepreneur. I'm not a serial company director. Probably the best one known you may recall was Kalahari Minerals. I was represented that company on the board of the Topco in Australia, which was an ASX 100 company. And we sold our uranium, well, we sold the company, had the world's largest uranium mine in Namibia. And I think it was, at the time, it may well still be the second largest AIM takeover. Cash takeover in history. So look, being around great people, you've got to be lucky. You've got to put yourself in the right place to be lucky. And I suppose that's why I'm talking to you today.
Absolutely. And with that, what, in terms of the timeline with Artemis Resources, what's been the last 5 years? What's that been like for you as a path, as a company?
Sure. Well, look, I can only speak for the last two. Okay. I suppose where I could expand the horizon into 5 years would be talking about Havieron, and some of your listeners will know. I guess my journey to taking over the company in 2 years ago really began. I ran an investment company called Primoris, and for my sins, as part of my education, I wrote my thesis on Telfer-style gold deposits, and maybe like a long lost girlfriend or something. I've always sort of, in the mining magazines, always kept an eye out because, one of the world's great gold mines in Telfer, and not much had really happened for, 30, 40 years in terms of, step change new discoveries. And I was literally looking through Mining Journal online, which is a bit sad of me, but I was. And I just saw something on a little UK explorer doing some work near Telfer. And I thought, oh, wow, okay, cool. And then, of course, I don't need to tell you what happened there. And luckily enough, my investment company, I decided to buy quite a few shares. I think we owned, I can't remember, 40, 50 million shares before they ran. I think I left that company with a nice £6 million tax, £6 million profit, cash profit on that trade. And then the opportunity came 2 years ago to get involved in Artemis, and that was really a rebuilding phase for the company and a recapitalisation.
Okay.
So a group of us came in, and look, to get to the nub of the matter, we loved the Pattersons. We loved the Carlo Gold Project, and these are our two projects we have now.
Yes.
There was a lot of rebuilding and streamlining of the company. It had far too many projects. It was chewing through too much cash, just trying to keep the lights on. So we went away and did all that. And I think, and the final part of that, just to sort of quickly finish, was, we always envisaged being listed in London, obviously with the huge success of Greatland, and that's what we achieved this week.
Which is just fantastic. How long has that process taken you from sort of, maybe the idea was a while ago, but sort of really getting down to it? How long has that taken you to get to London?
To be frank, really hard peddling. We had to streamline the portfolio first. Having 10 projects sounds terrific, and everyone says, "Oh, but you've got 10 projects." Well, yeah, your minimum hold costs $3 million a year just to own the licenses. So everyone forgets that it's lovely to have optionality on all sorts of projects, but the world don't work that way. Otherwise, BHP would own every license in the world. So it took a long time, and we've done divestments in using all the tools available to us. Unfortunately, in this world, and I do hope for that to change. People don't just ring you up and say, "Here's a massive check for your project." They want to take, they want you to take some risk, and they want to take some risk.
Yeah.
So you don't tend to get big cash up front. So these are for less developed projects, right? Pre-resource type stuff. So we did some spin outs with Green Tech, which has been a big success. It's doubled since listing. That was our battery metals portfolio. We listed it on the ASX about 2 months ago, and it's gone really, really well. And we own a big percentage of that. We've sold individual tenements to people. We've taken equity. We've taken cash. So, there's a whole gamut of ways you can create value, but it's not just the headline figure you get. It's also the money you save. And
Yes.
I do think people need to remember this when they look at juniors. If I'm looking at a junior company and I see they've got 10 projects, my first question is why?
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a good thing. So once we had all that done, we then went into the AIM process. And look, again, I look a bit older than I am, having been through the AIM process a few times. It is pretty exhaustive,
I bet.
especially when you're already a listed company. But we got through it. The team did a really good job, and by team I mean Artemis side, I mean WH Ireland, our advisors, Hill Dickinson, our lawyers, and all sorts of gamut of people involved. We really went hard. We all worked over Christmas, New Year's, and I think we got it in pretty good time. Just to give you guidance, full tilt emails pinging off every 5 minutes. You're looking at about 4 to 5 months.
Wow, that's a lot of it's a lot of work to get to where you are. But now obviously you've opened Artemis Resources up to a whole new client of investors. Do you anticipate any investor meets? Will that
Absolutely.
happen, or will that just be something for sort of AGMs and stuff?
100%. Look, one of the frustrations of being an ASX listed company with, when you're in the UK, especially, in COVID especially, is you don't get to do that.
Yeah.
I do, if you have a look at our recent presentation, which is available online at our website, we actually do have a large number already, especially of institutional UK and European investors. Our largest institutional investors are London-based, and of course I semi-regularly get to speak to them as and when they summons me to have a chat.
Yeah.
But yeah, on the individual investor side and the PI side, no, and it's been really frustrating because private investors are the heart and soul of all listed companies. It doesn't matter whether you're Artemis, it doesn't matter whether you're Rio Tinto. People who buy, sell, and hold your stock daily. That's what makes share prices move. And yeah, we're very much looking forward to being much more available to certainly that section in the UK, and hopefully as travel opens up in Australia, we can do a lot more there.
Yeah, yes. I think I'll just come to the one in Australia because I've not been out that way yet. So I'll just skip the UK one, come back to Australia. The when you look at the two projects that you've got now, being Carlo Castle and the Patson, obviously they're in very, very different stages of where they are. You've got the processing plant at Radio Hill. Is that has that got much throughput at the moment, or are you hoping to sort of get more into that as time goes on?
Yeah, sure. Look, again, this is sort of a bit of the sort of history of the company. The company bought the Radio Hill plant about 2017, so certainly before my time, and they did it for a couple of reasons. First of all, they had sort of ambitions to treat early stage gold ores, okay, and also because that is the only plant in the region that is permitted for processing gold and tailings in the area, okay. And that has a huge time and cost implication. It has has an asset value in and of itself, the property, plant, and equipment, but also the sort of less tangibles, the fact that it is on granted mining and there are operating leases there, certainly for gold extraction, etc. Look, when I came in, and we sort of had a look through the portfolio and sort of what we call a cold towel day, and decided, look, what was obviously key and where we had a vision of where the company might be, which thankfully it is now where we wanted, exactly where we wanted to be. Look, we wanted to build a resource base that was more meaningful. Okay, before we even look at plant and capex and how big a plant could be or how small or whatever those metrics are, you have to get the cart and the horse in the right order. Okay, and that involves a resource that is of size that the industry will take notice of you and investors will take notice of you. Now, and many of your listeners will already know the number. The number is 1 million ounces. Okay, it's just that it's that number in the industry where you're the real deal. Okay, and Carlos certainly, we feel can deliver that. And so we've been, rather than focusing on plant and trying to do some early stage work, and being a bit of a drain on capex and opex, because everyone says, "Oh, why don't you just start mining?" Well, you're going to have $50 million of establishment costs. Who's going to pay for that?
Yeah.
You're not permitted for it either. So, and unfortunately in this life, it's not. You don't just pick up you don't just pick up a D9 and start mining. It doesn't work that way. So that's why. Yeah, that's why all companies do what we're proposing.
Yeah,
Get your resource scaled. So that's what we're doing at Carlo, and that you'll be, your listeners will be able to hear a lot more about that very soon. We're back out there drilling because we feel the project has the ability to at least meet that minimum mark, and so
Super.
That's what's going on there. Yeah.
So going from the old and then coming to the new, you now yourself own Tenement across the Patterson, which is pretty much the hottest postcode in Australia at the moment. How did you get?
Story.
I'm about to say, how did you get that tenement, or was that something that happened before you got there?
It was something that happened before I got there. So
was that then, just to sort of follow that on, was that a bit of a sweetener for you to get your hands on, sort of having that tenement in that location that you know so much about already?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. There's, the industry is full of people, you have to have, unfortunately, look, stepping back in exploration, you have to be prepared to fail. And you have to, in exploration, there are 999 people out of 1,000 that will tell you you're stupid, you're doing the wrong thing, you don't know what you're doing, you're wasting money. You have to accept that fate as an explorationist, okay? Because I get it every day. And people tell you, "Oh, you're an idiot. You don't, and that's the way it works." So there's a nifty story behind that. Back to the Mining Journal. I read that article, and funnily enough, there was one of the directors of Artemis who I know was over from Australia, and I went and had lunch with him. I can tell you I had lunch with him. I had lunch with him at the Golden Dragon Chinese restaurant in Leicester Square. And we were talking about many other things, of times gone by 10 years ago when we did this and weren't we silly. And I just made mention of him. I said, "Oh, by the way, there's this little company, London-based company, having a crack out in the Pattersons." I said, "You should have a go for that." And he said, "Yeah, all right, okay." And fair play, they did. And legend is always, it's like fishing. The fish always gets a bit bigger and a bit heavier. But they literally, in fairness to them, they acted on it and they went and they went and applied for that ground and they beat Rio Tinto by 20 minutes. And that is just a fact, okay, in their application. So I used to phrase earlier, you need a bit of good luck and good management. And I think there's a slightly misattributed golf analogy that, I'd rather be lucky than good. But you need a bit of that. You just do, I'm afraid. So, that's kind of the story. And look, it was a massive sweetener. Well, it wasn't a sweetener. It was the passion that got us in to do that. Because, I don't need to tell you, what a great well, certainly in hindsight at the time it was a good idea, but now it's a seminal idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it came about.
Absolutely. So you've got this. You've got Apollo, and then coming around the other side, you've got Nimitz and Enterprise, and there's all these little areas and pockets of interest.
Sure.
And I appreciate we have to be careful what we say here, but we were awaiting results for your first exploration activities. And you guys posted a picture recently of some cores that have come out the ground. How excited are you? Are you able to say how excited you are about what you've seen?
Sure. Look, well, first of all, we don't have assays at hand, so everything I say is caveated through that.
Absolutely.
And one thing I do know in this industry is until you have that data in your hand, you've got to be very, very careful about what you say. Look, exploration is, and again, it's difficult not to make people's eyes roll, but exploration is a journey. It's fishing, not catching. Okay, I wish every drill hole we drilled went straight through the pickle barrel. Stepping back to the fabulous Javieron deposit, it had a good sort of just under a dozen holes from Newcrest in it, and all right, got some sniffs. First couple of holes it had, it took about 13 or 14 holes to hit the absolute barrel, which was obviously had 5, one of the great drill holes of the last 20 years. And we're on the same journey. It's the same journey, and our job as explorationists is very, very simple, is to make a discovery with the least number of those drill holes. So, I can speak for my colleagues around the world. No geologist goes out to drill interesting geology, and they're going out to make a discovery.
Yeah.
But, we use the term vectoring, but it is vectoring. When you've got 400 meters of cover, unfortunately, I'm not given X-ray eyes. It'd be nice if I did. But that's our methodology. So back to your question, when our geos are sitting on the rig, and those pictures were taken from the rig in the core trays as they came up hot out of the core barrels, you have to have an idea. What are you looking for? What's the basic you're looking for? And sections of those, nicer looking bits, well, that's kind of what we're looking for. We think that's what we're looking for in advance of having data. If you said, what would you kind of like to see? Well, that's kind of like we said. And look, we made clear in our report, I don't think we're going to have 5, right? We don't have 275 meters of that. I think, but by winging it, by nicking it, by using that, But again, talking about prospectivity and why we're excited. You use the word excited because we are excited. We're excited because it's the first hole into that.
Yeah.
And if you actually think about your odds and the sort of geometry of something, just sort of hit something that is either has gold in it or is extremely proximal to something that does. They're the sort of odds, they're the calculations we make in our head, because that then tells us exactly where we're going to drill the next hole, which is going to be straight back through there, as I'm sure you've already guessed. So that's particularly exciting. And look, the trouble with neurology plays is you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Neurology is all well and good, but if you don't have the same geology and the same structures and the same generic sort of basic model running through there, then, well, you are just nothing, It's like saying I live in a bus stop near Buckingham Palace, but you're not Buckingham Palace, okay?
Yeah.
It's the same. It's the same thing in this game. So look, we were really excited about what we saw. We liked the temperature of the alterations and things we saw. The sulfide assemblages look good. We're just going to have to wait and see. What they give us. I think and we look next door because that's we're looking for. We're not looking for a Javieron. We're looking for something near Javieron. Great gold systems, great gold. I get asked a lot, what's a gold camp? Kalgoorlie is the best one, discovered by an Irishman, 150 years ago, pushing a wheelbarrow. The interesting thing about Kalgoorlie and the near Kalgoorlie area, there are just multiple mineralization styles represented. Even in the famous super pit, it's produced, 70 million ounces or so. There's 3 distinct styles of mineralization that if you sort of looked at one in isolation, you wouldn't think the other 2 would be any around there. You know what I mean? So you've got to use all the clues you can get given by what everyone else is doing, but you've got to keep your mind alive to other possibilities. So, just looking at, the monster discovery next door, it's got this very, not unique, but it's got this sulfide crescent, right, that we all talk about and we all look at and salivate over with the grades in that. what's really interesting about that was, that of itself very much defined the bullseye target.
Okay.
So the tail could wag the dog and say, well, that could be the constraining limits of what's there. I think what's particularly exciting, it's always going to be our thesis, but I think it's been borne out in fact, is that there are other mineralisation styles, that are now, and this is all publicly available data, just to be clear. So our geologists and myself, we all look at that and say, well, the breccias look pretty good too, but they don't have that geophysical signature, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think when a major discovery is made, and especially undercover where you can't see the rocks with your own eyes, everyone's just got to keep their mind alive to what is possible. But yeah, no doubt that geez, Mike's actually our discovery. Well, our geologist who was on the rig was actually an Englishman. Okay. But we were pretty stoked with what we saw. We're not claiming we've got the next Had 5, no. But the next hole after that can be a Had 5. So that's what we're doing.
I mean, this is the start of your own chapter, isn't it? Of possibly your own new story. There's every chance that can happen for you. With that, and I suppose, and this is the part that a lot of investors maybe don't always see when it comes to exploration, is you could spend a year on a drill program, and all that's going to do is give you data for actually next year's drill program, and it could take you 3 or 4 years of honing in into that specific area, because you don't know how big your pocket of gold is that you're looking for. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, look, it's certainly a fair assessment across the industry. There's no doubt about that. I think we're, from a risk reward basis for me as a director and an investor in the company, and I suppose as part of our sort of what I really like about the idea of the Pattersons is a couple-fold, and I'll come to your specific point in a second. Looking for big targets means you've got a much higher percentage of hitting them, to be frank with you. Yep. So
fair enough.
We're looking for largest targets, okay, and we're looking for largest targets near an already large target. So I'm just going through our sort of risk matrix and how we decide where we want to spend our exploration dollar and now pound, because that's a huge part of our job, is allocating that and saying, right, because going off chasing, exploration is such a sort of, it's subjective and subtle in the sense that, you've got to apply science and risk management. You've got to know when to call it. You can't go chasing rainbows either. So there's where's the balance? Look, we're chasing big targets. I think, as evidenced by hopefully, what we think we hit in GDRC 007, reported as in December, is evidence that we may have hit the side of a big target or part of a big target. It's always nice when you have one of the largest gold companies in the world drilling a couple hundred meters away from you, because look, that doesn't guarantee success that they're drilling there. They don't have X-ray eyes either.
No.
But everyone's science is moving in the same direction, right? All the limited data we have. So to answer your question, I don't, look, we're looking for big targets. We've got those sort of structurally, geophysically, and geochemically mapped out. We know where we're going to be drilling for the next year. I don't see it sort of as a program that's going to wander, if that's kind of what you ask. It's not going to wander aimlessly off into nothing. We know exactly where we're going to be drilling for the next 24 months.
Okay.
And our constraining factor is thankfully we've got heritage in place now, which is which is great. Coming out of the wet season, which has actually been relatively dry, touch wood. And then we've got all year to drill, and we can do it in a much more ordered way. But yeah, we've got our what we call phase 1 and phase 2 targets lined up, and that's going to take us all of this year at least.
Super. How long does it take roughly to drill a hole? Let's say we're going to go down. Let's go 1,000 meters down.
Yep.
How long would you expect that to take?
Yeah,
from
look,
a driller's perspective.
Look at every hole changes, but they're all pretty darn hot drillers. We've been using DDH1, who are obviously used next door as well. Just to give, it's interesting, and again, I know a lot of your readers and viewers already know this. There's 400 meters of cover there. Everyone think, at first ever thought it was hard rock and you'd be drilling away for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's actually quite soft. It goes from sort of limestone, sort of peelite limestones we call, sort of quite consolidated, the sort of thing that might face, Portland stone on the front of a building, through to sand. to actual sand, just running sand. And actually that can pose challenges. So we lost a hole at the end of last year because running sand. So the sand then comes down and chokes. It falls in on the rods and actually chokes the rods.
Right.
So look, that in and of itself, you can either RC it that we do, or you can rotary mud. I'm getting a little technical, but basically, getting through the cover surface should only take you about 5 or 6 days. You actually have to case it with a degradable casing under the regulations. So then you sort of get to the top of target, if you like. And as you remember, HAD 5 was literally the first meter into that what we call the Proterozoic, which is the host age of the host sequence anyway. And from then on, the drilling's actually, well, thus far, touch wood, we've found it be quite predictable.
Okay.
Guys have been knocking out about 30 metres a shift. Sometimes they can get quicker. You can get into breccias where it gets a bit, they might not be mineralised, but you can get broken ground where it can be a bit trickier.
Okay.
We use HQ core, which is quite like that, and which is quite broad. And then if it gets a bit trickier, we can shrink the core size, down to NQ. So look, the short answer is I would say go to WOE, you're really looking at about a bit under 3 weeks. Okay, so sort of 2 weeks and 2 days or something like that, for about 1,000 metres. Yeah. Okay. So it's not too bad at all.
No. Have you been out there yet?
Well, last time I was out there was in the 90s. Obviously, I've been stuck in the UK. You can't get into Western Australia, and you still can't get into Western Australia. So no, we're planning to be out there, but I have been out that way. Yes, absolutely.
Is it as hot and as hard as you'd expect it to be in those heats?
Oh, jeez, I wouldn't want our geologist running at Michael Bork and Starzy can speak for that. Cooked is the word they often use.
Right.
Yeah, look, it really is, and I know shareholders all want everything to happen yesterday, so do I. But, I mean, they did. I think the final shift, we pushed late into December this year, really late. Everyone else had knocked off well and truly. Average daily temperature was about 48. Which is borders on dangerous. We had special air-conditioned pods for people to cool down. We did an extra health and safety audit. And people have died out there. You can die out of there in heat stroke in no time, 10 minutes. So we have to be very, very careful. I don't think we'll push that late again. We won't have to. We've got more time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's quote unquote bloody hot.
That's fair enough. 48 degrees. I mean, I don't think anyone could even comprehend what that's like to be in.
It's pretty brutal.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look forward. You've now listed on the AIM exchange.
Yep.
What do you see 2022 holding for you?
Sure. And we're going to outline this really soon. Look, we've made it clear what our corporate strategy and what our corporate plans are, which is just to drill and drill. It's as simple as that. Like you say, at the Greater Carlo project, which we think is, again, here's the sales pitch, Liam. But there's a reason we did all this. We didn't do it. We didn't tidy up this company, because we had nothing better to do with our lives. The Greater Carlo project is company maker in and of itself. Okay, and of course it has Radio Hill attached to it. We have an asset. We have a book value of Radio Hill at $20 million. But just forget that. Carlo in of itself is a company maker. It's a gold copper project with cobalt byproduct potential. We're just going to be drilling. We're in the exciting phase. We're just growing resources there, and it's not infill drilling. It's step out. The project in one dimension had been drilled in the east-west. We said, well, what's over there? Literally what's 50 metres away, and we're drilling a thing called crosscut. Which is not in any resource yet, and at the moment it's 800 metres and still open, and that's actually copper gold, as is the gold copper. Wow. So look, we'll be doing that, and look, clearly at the Pattersons, we had 2 rigs running up until Christmas. We'll be back out with 2 rigs. I'll be giving guidance on when that's all going to happen soon, but like I said, leave some incense sticks to your local weather gods. If the weather stays like it is, we'll be extremely happy. We're certainly not here to play weather and climate cards, but if they get flash floods out there, we live in the real world. People say, oh well, that's okay, guys. You move a drill rig through 2 feet of water, but anyway, we're looking good. We've got all our equipment people lined up. Hopefully, COVID's reasonably manageable in Western Australia. Obviously, there's a huge skills crunch in the industry, as I'm sure you're aware of. But, we touch wood, as I speak to you today, Liam, we think we've got everything right where we want it, but, everything's
Perfect.
subject to change. But it really is just going to involve drilling in the Pattersons. And look, I think I'm not going to win any awards for suggesting where we might be drilling our first next hole at Apollo, and we'll just be following up on that, doing all those good things. It looks like we said we've got quite a few more holes to do at Apollo and Atlas. We've only just started there. I mean, and this is what I do ask people. We've only just started. Allow our geos to drill some holes before we claim discovery. It's the beginning, isn't it? It's the beginning. I know it seems like it's taken a long time to get here, and heritage and approvals does take a long time, but that's the world we live in, people. But yeah, drill all year. And of course, I want to get to Juno and Voyager in the north. We've done some extra geophysical work on those. We really like the look of those two targets. And then, of course, we've got to swing, as you say, almost come around the clock face. We've got follow-up, we've got to do at Nimitz and the Enterprise targets to the south that we, everyone always asks me, what's your favourite target? Well, my favourite target's my favourite target. Well, my favourite target's the target I've just made a discovery on. But in all seriousness, we look at all the geological interp, and then we have the access issues. There's some, I'm sure your followers will know, there's some pretty unique access issues out there with these very long parallel sand dunes and all sorts of crazy stuff. And I know shareholders don't care, but these are things we have to deal with daily. So yeah, Enterprise is a really high priority target for us as well. But at the moment, phase one was going to be Atlas and Apollo. We got about halfway through it. We've got the second half to do, and I'll be telling you all when that's going to kick off soon. And, hold on to your hats is my advice.
Absolutely. With the geology of it all down there if you don't mind me getting into the geology, because I'm quite interested in that personally.
No, absolutely.
I'm seeing it that over hundreds of millions of years, correct me if I'm wrong there, that these events have happened and all this, I'm going to call it rock, has come to the surface. And then somehow there's been another event, and then you've had more come up. Is that kind of how this has happened, and how you've got different layers and different breccias and stuff?
Look, all basic sort of gold geology 101. You've got a host sequence, and then you've got a mineralized sequence, and there's a whole lot of different ways you can happen. But in very simplistic terms, you got to add a couple of zeros on your ages. It's a bit older than that. Proterozoic goes back over.
I tried.
1.6 or 1.7. Anyway, look, basically what we've got a whole lot of folded sandstones. Now, they were laid down zillions of years ago, all been folded into these beautiful folds, and looks all very pretty. It looks like the Dorset coast. Have you ever been down Dumbledore and those sort of ways? It's all lovely there. Anyway, there you go. Boom. And into that, and it really essential, and this is, I'm lucky enough to study this part of I did intrusive related gold deposits, right? Into that sequence has been intruded some rocks that basically come from a lot deeper. And these rocks are coming up from the mantle, okay? They're very hot, they're magmas effectively. And within those, either within the magma itself, or within the host rock, or within both, has been an unusual enrichment in rare and valuable metals that we're all after, right? Whether it's gold or copper, all these sort of things. But in this case, we're talking about gold, copper, intrusive related. So the intrusion that's come in, like a sort of hot balloon coming up into these other rocks, it can either contain the metal or it can remobilize the metal, or they often do both. Now, what do I mean by remobilize? It's a huge source of heat. Believe it or not, in rocks, there's water, there's fluids, and it volatilizes those fluids. It creates circulatory patterns, and those into those fluids are diluted or dissolved the metals that we're all after. Okay, they're remobilized or mobilized in the first place, and it can happen. It can be like a pump. It can do it once. It can do it multiple times, and then the question is, well, that's all well and good, but where have those concentrations? Where have those metals been placed in concentrations that are economic? Okay, now that can often faults, because faults basically just create a conduit, or what I call plumbing. And those fluids race along those plumbing, they cool down, they slow down, they can either have chemical reactions, like potentially at the sulfide crescent zone, or whatever, and they're deposited out. Okay, right. It provides a space for those, either chemically or physically or both. So that's actually what we're after. So there's clearly a big heat engine somewhere around Javier on. It's quite deep. It's probably about 3 or 4 kilometres. There seems to be some granitoids down there that are probably providing this heat engine. Our thesis has always been, everyone's favourite dolerite dike. Now that's that's observable from space, that bad boy. Well, certainly geophysically anyway. Now that dike doesn't have any gold in it because that dike came in later. But there was clearly a big plane of weakness, otherwise known as a fault. So our theory has always been that fault has been at least one causative effect or positive effect, or plumbing effect of Javier, because it is no surprise that the dolerite dike goes right through the middle of it, right? That would be quite a big coincidence, would it not? So maybe that had something to do with it. It doesn't have to be, and again, I'm probably digressing a little bit. It doesn't all have to be one. It doesn't have to be one incident. It could be, and you did allude to this, it could be multiple. It can then get hot again. It can be another magma can come up. So this is why you can have multiple mineralization styles all kind of in the same place. It doesn't, it's not like sort of, well, that's a red car, that's a blue car. You can have all the different colors in the same car park. So yeah, but your general theory is correct then, yeah.
Okay, cool. Side note, might cut this bit out. To the southwest, the southeast, you've got this huge crack, or looks like a crack or a crevice when you look at it from space. Could that be remotely related to everything that's happened over the billions of years?
100%. No, you're bang on. Again, well, that's a regional thrust fault. Okay, it's actually called the Javier on thrust on the geological. That's a major crustal feature. Then going oblique to that, or due north to that, is the secondary feature that I've been banging on about.
Right, okay.
That is gold 101, major crustal feature with a secondary splay coming off it. What can be interesting, and again, this is all sort of broad brush geology, just to be clear, this is just making general comments. Big crustal features can go down deep, deep, deep into the earth, and that's what we call mantle tapping features. Now, Javier on thrust may or may not be a mantle tapping feature, but it's certainly in the scale that could be. That can be almost like a leak. That could be the thing that got these rocks from way down deep to way up, much closer to the earth. Because that's provided the pathway on that sense, and then you've got the secondary splay where it's perhaps been remobilized along. There's a smaller bit of plumbing. But again, this is all, the great thing about being a geologist is you can arm wave like this, can't you? And you can make stories to fit your narrative. But when we present these stories, these are based on looking at other gold deposits around the world. And, geologists aren't all just, waving at maps and making up stories. Geology is a great science in that it's quite what I call a closed science. We don't have any massive gaps in understanding geology, both of how the earth works and how mineral, there's always new things to learn, but you can apply these basic techniques, whether you're in Western Australia or West Africa or the Tian Shan Mountains or up in Greenland. We apply those same models, and lo and behold, very often you find gold in those same settings. So, yeah.
And that's where the geologists get excited, I suppose, because by bringing them up live cores, they're able to have a look at what's under the ground, because it's not like you can just cut a whole section out and look at it like it's those cliffs in Devon that you mentioned. And then they're able to read, aren't they? They're able to look at them and see what flows has happened over the years. Yep. And then that's how they would suggest where their next drill should go. Is that kind of how it works?
It is. It is kind of how it works. So we look at the rock type. So first, when a bit of core comes up or whatever, you hand a rock to a geologist. First thing he does, he looks at what he thinks the rock is. And we've got all these classifications for rocks, right? Whether you go from, felsic, from granites through to sort of, anyway, there's a whole scale. It's often based on magnesium and iron content. Okay. And that's just the way it's done. So anyway, you go through the felsic, through to mafic, through to ultramafic. They're the sort of three, from an igneous rock perspective, clusters that we're looking at, right? So we have a look at that and we go, right, well, we think that rock was basically that. We then look within the rock, so we identify the rock. So we say, right, that's a gabbro. Okay. Within that rock, we then look for sort of the pathfinders to what could be in there. So you've got a couple of layers for that. First of all, whether you can see any structures, and often you've seen pictures of core with sharp lines go with little micro faults or breccia faults where all the rock's been cracked. So you can come up with a sort of textural description of that rock. So you come up with a generic description of the base rock, textural description. You then have a look at what we call alteration. So what is alteration? Alteration is that rock has been in its perfect world would be born like this. It's then been subject to fluid flow or temperature or pressure or all of the above at the same time. And that then changes the minerals within it. And we have all these little things we learn at university where we can recognize the new minerals and then conclude what the old ones probably were. And we look for, leaching, bleaching, chlorite, all words you've seen in our and all the geology around the Pattersons, chlorite, biotite, actinolite alteration. What that means is that some fluid, heat and pressure has changed the mineral composition. Why is that interesting? Because that starts to tell you you're heading towards some heat and fluid and all those good things. Then you look for the shiny stuff, which I was only ever good enough to recognise. All the other stuff was too hard. And that's the sulfides, and that's where it gets good. So you look for your sulfide species. These are all the brassy, goldy, silvery coloured things that we all like to see. Minerals we like to see, and they're typically they are metal sulfides. Okay. Now a large number of them are iron sulfides, which in and of themselves have no economic value per se. We then have a whole range of copper sulfides, etc., from chalcopyrite, chalcolite, etc. When you've got chalcopyrite, there's some copper there. Now, it doesn't mean that you're economic, but so where gold gets in, why is this important for gold? Okay, because gold, in a simple sense, likes to hang out with those minerals. It gets scavenged by and is deposited aside or within, not always, and again, because there's always such a huge broad brushstroke in geology, but sulfide content, gold lives aside and within the crystals of some of those. It could be chalcopyrite, it could be pyrite, fool's gold. Fool's gold can have gold in it. It's not gold. Iron pyrite is not gold, but it can often have. There are a lot of gold mines where the gold is contained within crystals of pyrite, and pyrrhotite, which is or can be magnetic. Sometimes it's not magnetic, etc. So we look for all of those sulfide minerals. Now, we know that at Havieron, in some areas, there's some really good sulfide content, sulfide crescent being the most obvious one, right? And that core just looks sexy as hell. But what's really interesting is there's a whole range of other mineralisation styles, and we're just starting to get a good look at that on the recent updates. You're starting to see some of these breccias don't seem to have a very high sulfide content. They will have sulfides in them, but they're not what we call massive sulfide lenses. Now, that's where it gets interesting, because if I'm being absolutely frank with you, that's kind of what we're looking for. We don't think we'll find a sulfide crescent because we don't have that bullseye magnetic target. But That doesn't mean, give me that breccia all day long, baby, because, that is of interest to us.
Yeah.
We also encountered some sulfidic diorites, okay? Now, I don't think those diorites in and of themselves contain gold within them. They do contain sulfides, which is unusual. We need to get some chemical assays on that and understand what it means, whether it was a source or a host or blah, blah, blah. But where we got really interested in hitting those diorites, because from the pictures that I've seen publicly available and the presentations done by Newcrest, those diorites seem to form a bit of a core at the centre of Havieron, okay? So, I don't understand what the significance of that is. It forms a crowning, or I'm not sure. But, these are all just small things you're doing, clues on the way to telling you where to drill that next hole, because that was the original question you asked me. The way around to do that is to put all that together, and that's what tells you where the next hole is. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's just... I mean, just sitting listening to you, I can tell how excited you are just about the whole process. That's without actually then having your eureka moment of the potential of something coming up of massive significance that then actually benefits companies and shareholders all along the way.
Look, I'll be absolutely clear, and this is a sales pitch to myself, it's a sales pitch to anyone. If you told me 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago that I'd be drilling just to be clear, in Western Australia, okay, next to 20 plus million ounce discovery, I would have laughed at you.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't get opportunities. First of all, we didn't think there were many 20 million ounces left to be found, if any.
No.
Okay. But then to be in a position where we had the ground next to it, because I do remind people when they look at those tenement maps, right? Because I'm going to go on to a couple of questions I know you're dying to ask me, but most of those tenement map boundaries were drawn up 15, 20 years ago. It wasn't drawn like that because they thought Havieron was only there and the rest was all rubbish. Okay, we're all just fools to fate and history, right? So when people go, well, they've cut that out, so there's obviously nothing here and there. Well, these were decisions made well before anyone knew there was anything there. But I think what's really, interesting is that opportunity to drill in Western Australia, we're not taking any sovereign risk. Okay, I wouldn't. There's a lot of countries I would invest my money. I certainly wouldn't invite anyone else to invest their money there. To have that opportunity, that leverage, is, well, I will never get it again. Okay, it won't happen again. I wish it would, but it probably won't. And from that sense, I think people have misunderstood what we've done. I've been involved with some great teams. We've done, huge drill outs in Africa and things like that, and that was all great. But I'm in Western Australia. I can raise the money at good prices to go drill our targets. Just by doing a deal. There's nothing wrong with doing deals with majors, by the way. The deal that Clayton did with Newcrest was a cracking deal, and it was the right deal. It was, I was a shareholder. I supported it. I think we were a top 5 shareholder. We supported it. It was a great, perfect thing to do. But I can leverage off the benefit of, Sean, Callum, and Gervais's work now because there's a mine under construction nearby.
Yeah.
So I can go and find my resources and work out what I want to do with it. So I think people go, oh, well, you haven't done a joint venture. Why would you do a joint venture? We haven't. We've only just started drilling.
Yeah, that's it, isn't
it? Me contracting DDH1, all right, there's some really smart people in all companies, from Newcrest to Greatland to Rio, I could pay to get the same drill rig to drill the holes where I want to drill them. But doing a deal with a major does not guarantee you success. They do not have X-ray eyes that none of us have. We have specifically kept 100% of our ground because we love our ground, because we think we're going to make a discovery, and I could afford to, and we take no political risk in doing so, go out and do the work. I mean, that is an unfathomable, and I think people have misinterpreted the fact that we haven't done a joint venture as somehow a reflection of our ground. I mean, nothing could be further. The exact opposite is the truth. Yeah. And that isn't me being smug or arrogant. That is just being realistic. And as I said earlier, they've been able to have the luxury that people before me didn't have.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it doesn't get any better than this.
No, not at all.
Anyway.
I guess from your perspective, it's, and please do stop me if I'm not right here, is actually if, and obviously it's a massive if, the company chose to go down the route of a venture with somebody else further along the line, you would actually have more information, more data, and more stuff to present to them to say, this is what we have.
100%. Look, I've been involved in some decent size M&A in the mining sector. And here's a couple of things that don't happen. I wish they did. Trust me, I really wish they did. Big companies don't come along and write junior companies checks, massive checks for unproven ideas. Okay, doesn't happen. Okay, no. If you're running a $40 billion gold company, you have board processes, etc., that mean you have to base your valuation on something. Okay, and I think we're seeing a good example of this at the minute, but I'll stick with my story. You have to create some value there. You can do a joint venture and let them take some exploration risk. But, I can't think of some circumstances under which we would do that before we've drilled a decent amount of holes and made a discovery. Why would I?
Yeah.
So the point is so burst a few bubbles. Big companies do not come along and write billion-dollar checks for companies, that have some interesting ground and some ideas. Okay. You've got to put some meat on the bone. I'll give you a great example. When we Kalahari, and I was a director of Extract, the top co, we did $100 million worth of drilling to drill that project out. Okay, we already had Rio Tinto as a major shareholder and a Toshu Group, etc. But you funnily enough, Liam, you have to allow people to be able to, if you want to sell, you have to allow them to be able to buy you. So you have to create some value. You can't just expect them to come and write a blank $1 billion check for some ground. It doesn't work that way.
No, not at all.
So our plan is really, really simple. Make a discovery.
Yep.
Keep drilling, drill it, make it bigger, make it bigger, make it bigger, make it bigger. And then you can sit down and have a grown-up discussion in real corporate land, where people say, well, I can pay X for a reserve ounce, Y for a resource ounce. Because I've got a good reserve and resource, I can pay Z for your exploration. You can sit down there, you can come up with your model, and I'm sure we know of a company that's probably doing something like this right now over a certain 5% stake. And, that's how you create value. And so, I'm a huge fan of the team for Clayton, because that's exactly what they're doing, and so, yes, so that's our plan, and that's what we're going to execute.
Which is I'm really excited for it. Just to watch it all happen and unfold,
Yep.
and as we mentioned earlier, writing your own story, and writing your own chapters in the book, which is just fantastic. Well, unfortunately, as fast as that time went, that is our time. We are now all out of time. So I would love to thank you very much for your time this morning on this Artemis Resources presentation. If you'd like to contact the company, artemisresources.com.au, there is a contact us page. Feel free to fill that in, and you can also reach at Artemis Resources on Twitter if you have any follow-up questions. Do you have any final words that you'd like to say to the investors?
Look, not at all. It's great to be listed in London. We've got great shareholders in Oz. Hopefully we can build a great shareholder base in London, and watch this space.
Alastair Clayton, Artemis Resources, thank you very much.